Paramahamsa, Pravikadācārya, Shota Shatashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so reading from Canto 3, Chapter 14, Text 31, chapter entitled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening. Someone take this.
Hey, can you get them down?
Sorry. Need to pull this table. Okay. All right. So the word for word Sanskrit while it comes up. Okay. Saha viditvā atha bhāryāyāḥ tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayā atha upaviveśa viditvātha bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa sa viditvātha bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa sa viditvātha bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa
viditvātha bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa
viditvātha bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa
viditvātha bhāryāyās
viditvātha bhāryāyās
तं nirbandham vikarmaṇi
natvā diṣṭāya
rahasi
tayāthopaviveśa
tayāthopaviveśa.
All right, word for word. Okay. Saha, he, viditvā, understanding. Atha, thereupon. Bhāryāyāḥ, of the wife. Tam, that. Nirbandhaṁ, obstinacy. Vikarmaṇi, in the forbidden act. Natvā, offering obeisances. Diṣṭāya, unto worshipable fate. Rahasi, in a secluded place. Tayā, with her. Atha, thus. Upaviveśa, lay. He, certainly. Okay, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, HG Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Upon understanding his wife's purpose, he was obliged to perform the forbidden act. And thus, after offering his obeisances unto worshipable fate, he lay with her in a secluded place. It appears from the talks of Kaśyapa with his wife that he was a worshipper of Lord Śiva. And although he knew that Lord Śiva would not be pleased with him for such a forbidden act, he was obliged to act by his wife's desire, and thus he offered his obeisances unto fate. He knew that the child born of such untimely sexual intercourse would certainly not be a good child, but could not protect himself because he was too obligated to his wife. In a similar case, however, when Ṭhākura Haridāsa was tempted by a public prostitute at the dead of night, he avoided the allurement because of his perfection in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. This is the difference between a Kṛṣṇa conscious person and others. Kaśyapa Muni was greatly learned and enlightened, and he knew all the rules and regulations of systematic life. Yet he failed to protect himself from the attack of sex desire. Ṭhākura Haridāsa was not born of a Brahmana family, nor was he himself a Brahmana. Yet he could protect himself from such an attack due to his being Kṛṣṇa conscious. Ṭhākura Haridāsa used to chant the holy name of the Lord 300,000 times daily. Om Agana Timanandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmanatam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shikta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raganavtam Itam Tam Chajivam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saditam Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Kṛṣṇa Padan Sahagana Lalitam Shri Vishakam Itam Shah Nama Om Vishnu Pādāya Kṛṣṇa Prasthāya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Nama Om Vishnu Pādāya Kṛṣṇa Prasthāya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paśyācya Desatarine Jai Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Bandeya Prasara Shayavir Yataha Sangarat Yatkaravakta Agya Siddhanta Sanmanim. Okay, so sa viditvā bhāryāyās tam nirbandhaṁ vikarmaṇi natvā diṣṭāya rahasi tayāthopaviveśa. Understanding his wife's purpose, he was obligated to perform the forbidden act, and thus after offering his obeisances unto worshipable faith, he lay down with her in a secluded place. So, Holy Kṛṣṇa Prabhu, I'll send you a picture. You don't have to pull it up yet. Oh, it's in the Charles phone? Okay. I sent you one thing. Did you forward that? Okay. Okay. That'll be like later. Let me just send it to you this time then real quick. Okay. All right. You don't have to pull it up now. You can pull it a little bit. So we're continuing. So Kaśyapa Muni has finally given in to the nagging of diṣṭāya. So previous to this, there's been a lot of different discussions and understanding of what was going on. So previously, Kaśyapa Muni was glorifying the position of a wife. We remember those different verses, that she's the better half, etc., such like that. Vishwanath Ṭhākura makes the point that Kaśyapa was doing that because he was trying to pass the time, because it was in the sanya. So we understand that's about like an hour and a half, a little bit less than that, that like time. So this was in the evening. So he was trying to kind of glorify her, to like wait for that time to kind of finish out. Because we see here, and what is it? I don't think I wrote it down, but in the previous, I think it was in text 9 or so, but he was like, so in that time, he's a Brahmin, so at that time, that's like Gayatri time. And traditionally, Gayatri was much longer process. We chant, it takes like about, maybe like 5, 7 minutes, maybe a little bit longer in the morning. But it takes some, it takes some time, and but also in that time, you're not supposed to eat, you're not supposed to sleep. There's like strict regulations for like brahmanas. You're mainly supposed to engage in like spiritual activities in those junctions. So she came during that time, so he was trying to kind of like kill a little bit of time and not engage at that particular point in time. But she was not chilling out. She was very much, she wanted to have the child like right then and there. Like she wanted to go right now, and there was nothing that he could really do to like convince her otherwise. So that's kind of like the situation there. Some of the things were said there too. And so anyways, we come to the position here today. So previously it's mentioned, you could pull up that picture now actually. So in the previous verse of this, Maitreya gives the scene here that diṣṭāya was thus informed by her husband, but she was pressed by Cupid for sexual satisfaction. She caught hold of the cloth of the great Brahmana sage, just like a shameless public prostitute. So this is like, anyways, I remember like first seeing this picture, but this is a picture kind of depicting that scene there. You could see, and I was just reading today actually, Prabhupada was instructing Janarati Mataji how to like paint this picture, and saying it was like in a hut, believe like how they have in India and such like that. So you can see he was in there trying to like, meditate. It's described that he was in samadhi actually. And so I believe I mentioned that before, but she practically was like yelling to like get his attention, just like making a big ruckus. And so he's trying to like, do his worship. And she's just like not like facilitating that that right then and there. So anyways, this is like a nice picture, and it kind of depicts the scene there. I think this was probably drawn in 72 or 73. So anyways, it's always good to kind of like see the pictures that go with that, because Prabhupada found this artwork very important for that. So anyways, we come to the verse today. There's actually a lot of points that Srila Prabhupada makes in this purport. I thought so, yeah. So anyways, I could talk about that real quick. I don't know. Prabhupada actually in the letter told Jadharani that she could paint him with Shaivite tilak. And there's been kind of like a discussion about like what's up with Kaśyapa. Actually, I looked into that today, and I sent Navani Hoda Prabhu a message. So I kind of explained that briefly. I was actually planning to get into that. So Srila Prabhupada in this purport, it's mentioned here that he was a worshiper of Lord Śiva. And then I think in a purport that you will give in a couple of days, I think you were talking about today, it's mentioned that he was like chanting Gayatri. Let me see here. Yeah, it's in the next verse. So it's mentioned that, let's see here, that he was chanting Gayatri. Let me see if I can find it exactly. Where is it here? Oh, so Kaśyapa Muni meditated on the impersonal Brahmajyoti by chanting the Gayatri mantra within his mouth. That's mentioned in the next text. And then Prabhupada says it appears that Kaśyapa Muni appears to be an impersonalist. So one thing that I looked into and saw, so that's kind of there. Then in other places, Prabhupada mentions that he was like a perfect spiritual master, because we'll read a little bit later, but he instructed DT to like follow regulations to become a Vaishnav, and there's other points where it's mentioned that he was like meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. So Sanatana Goswami makes a point in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and maybe I could pull that up here. Oh, sorry, somebody's calling me from New York. But let me see here. Let me just pull up what I sent to him today. So Sanatana Goswami in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita makes a couple points. So I'll kind of paraphrase, but so Sanatana Goswami makes the point that you have like Kṛṣṇa, Swayam Bhagavan Kṛṣṇa and Goloka Vrindavan, and then there's expansions of that. So similarly, like Krishna's associates in like Goloka Vrindavan, they expand from Goloka Vrindavan to Vaikuntha, then to the material world, and then those expansions in the material world expand further, like into like the actual like pastimes in the material world. And so he makes the point pretty much that like, so when they have the expansions from Goloka Vrindavan, they're considered like avatars, but when they come into the material world, they're not called avatars. And I'll read the text here. So he explains that the same associates with Lord Narayan again expand into the material world to become demigods. This verse calls the demigods pratirupaha, counterparts, rather than avatars, because the demigods are materially conditioned living beings. Still, those demigods are empowered representatives of the Supreme Lord's personal associates. And another text, he makes the point that so that's that was the previous text, but then the text after that, he explains what I was talking about, how they expand from Goloka and they come down and such. And Sanatana Goswami makes the point that, let's see here, as the expanded forms of Godhead are all non-different from the original Kṛṣṇa, the single fountainhead of existence. So when devotees like Nanda and Yashoda appear in expanded forms in Vaikuntha, those forms are in essence non-different from the original forms in Goloka. Kaśyapa and Aditi in heaven, however, being incomplete portions of Vasudev and his wife Devaki, are partially different from the Vasudev and Devaki on earth and partially the same. So my understanding of all that is, and then Shiva Ram Maharaj kind of like wrote something kind of like paraphrasing those verses, but pretty much it seems like the Kaśyapa and Aditi, they're like he's saying, they're expansions, but then there's like part of it is like they're like materially conditioned. So it seems like there's like some like split thing going on. Whereas like in the original like spiritual world, it's like complete, but then they come in contact with the material world, and then there's like an element of just like we're reading here, of just like being like disturbed by like sex desire and stuff like that. But like they're still like Krishna's associates. Anyways, it's kind of like an interesting like point in tattva. That's kind of like that's interesting. But Sanatana Goswami mentions that those points briefly in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Let's see here. But yeah, anyways, an interesting point there. So it's like, that's why you kind of have like both things, where Prabhupada says like he's an impersonalist, and then other places he says like he's like a pure devotee, like meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At least that's kind of like my understanding from like reading those things. But anyways, to kind of go back to the text. So coming to today, so Prabhupada makes the point here in the translation, understanding his wife's purpose. So one big underlying reasons for his wife's purpose was that it was dharmic. She did want a kid. She just like wanted a kid at the wrong time. And so that was kind of the problem with that. And Kaśyapa Muni was, in one sense, it was his duty to kind of like avoid that situation. But for one reason or another, he actually didn't do that. And Prabhupada gives different explanations for that in the Purport, interestingly citing Ṭhākura Haridāsa. And that can be a big subject also, and it's an interesting subject, because you would naturally think that someone who's, because to be, generally we talk about being, that is true, being born in India as a pious birth, but then also, to be born in his situation, like in the upper rungs of the demigod hierarchy, that's like pre-pious birth also. because that is also it's the same culture and everything. So he definitely had a good birth, and he had good training and everything like that. But despite all that, Prabhupada says here, he was greatly learned and greatly enlightened and knew all the rules and regulations of systematic life, yet he failed to protect himself from the attack of sex desire. So a lot of points can be gleaned from that. Maybe one big point is that the seriousness of the desire for sex life and the difficulty of overcoming that. And Srila Prabhupada cites Ṭhākura Haridāsa, specifically emphasizing the point that he wasn't born in a Brahmana family, so you can maybe infer that he wasn't really taught so much, like controlling the senses and things like that, and tapasya. And he was saying that he wasn't himself a Brahmana, so following the rules and regulations and stuff. But he makes the main point that he was able to protect himself due to being Kṛṣṇa conscious. And then Prabhupada, of course, cites at the end that he chanted the holy name 300,000 times daily, which is practically all day. There's a lot of chanting there. So the point is that he was always Kṛṣṇa conscious. So even when he was tempted multiple times due to his strength in Kṛṣṇa consciousness and his advancement and his perfection, he was able to avoid that situation. But we see here with Kaśyapa that he wasn't able to avoid that situation. So that's specifically mentioned here. Specifically that it's mentioned he performed a vikarmic activity. So that's been described, so that happened in the Sanya. And it's an important point to note also, and so I'll read some of this. You can pull this up if you want, but I'll read some from the 6th canto, 18th chapter. And you can just go to the index and maybe just go to text 22. But generally, it's understood that there's 3 types of, karmic action. So there's karma, vikarma, and akarma. So vikarma is generally understood, not generally, it's you become implicated in sinful activity, it's against Vedic regulations, and you shouldn't perform them. And karma is generally understood to be good results, but it's still binding. And then akarma doesn't produce any results, and Prabhupada has explained that to be devotional service, because you don't become further entangled. So karma and vikarma is bad, and obviously vikarma is worse, because that takes you away from Kṛṣṇa consciousness and degrades you and makes your life complicated, as we're going to see here with Kaśyapa Muni. So I thought one important point with this pastime and doing a little bit of research here is that so Kaśyapa Muni engaged in this activity, and he understood it was wrong, and he did that anyways, and a bad result happened. And you could say some good came from it also, because Prahlad Maharaj was born from Hiranyakashipu. But ultimately, in the immediate sense, it was bad, and there was some suffering that happened as a result. And I just thought that was interesting, because that he engaged in that activity, and then that also led to further problems, actually. It wasn't that just that thing happened, and then that situation was isolated, and then he kind of remedied it, and then everything was okay. It wasn't, actually everything wasn't okay, even after Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were killed. And so we'll read a little bit about that today. I have some different things here pulled up on my phone, so I may just read them periodically, just from the purports. So I'll read the first one here. So this is from the summary of this, and you don't have to pull this up. So just to help Indra, Lord Vishnu had killed Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Because of this, Diti was very envious, and she was eager to have a son who could kill Indra. By her service, she enchanted Kaśyapa Muni in order to beg from him a greater son to do this. In corroboration of the Vedic statement, vidvam sam api karshati, Kaśyapa Muni was attracted to his beautiful wife and promised to grant her any request. When, however, she requested a son who would kill Indra, he condemned himself and he advised his wife Diti to follow the Vaishnava ritualistic ceremonies to purify herself. So specifically in that summary, we see here that, so that whole situation happened, she gave birth to these kids, and that'll be the discussion here in these next further texts or chapters. But then they were killed, but then we see in the 6th canto that they were killed, that he engaged in that sinful activity, and then he became implicated in it again in the past, because she was fried out about it, because she was thinking like, okay, that happened, I shouldn't have done that. But then you're saying, well, Indra killed my sons, so like I need to get revenge. And so she was angry in that way and implicated him in that further. Of course, with this, demigods are actually born, the Maruts, but anyways, he wasn't very happy at first about that. So let's see here. So I'll just read some of these things here. So Sutta Goswami said, "O great sage Shonaka, after hearing Maharaj Parikshit speak respectively and briefly on topics essential to hear, Sukadeva Goswami, who is very aware of everything, praised his endeavor with great pleasure and replied." And so in the purport, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, and you don't have to pull it up, but he says, he stresses that even though Diti was very envious, her heart was purified because of devotional attitude. So from engaging in that vrata. Another significant topic is that although Kaśyapa Muni was a learned scholar and was advanced in spiritual consciousness, he nevertheless fell victim to the inducement of his beautiful wife. So that's also an important point. And we see that it happened again, so he also fell back into that. So these are important here for us to recognize, just for the fact that in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, we should think twice before we do something that we know we shouldn't do, because it can really implicate us for a long time over. We think we do something, bad or wrong or something, and then like, okay, I did that, and then, I'll just chant Hare Krishna and I'll be okay, or whatever. Or I'll just, won't eat sweets for a month, or something like that. But it may not actually be the case that you just do that thing. You have to actually like live with a bad choice that you've done in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And that happens sometimes. So we have to, be a little intelligent in life sometimes, and take shelter of devotees, and we shouldn't be afraid to be a fool in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Like if we're thinking something really stupid, we shouldn't be afraid to tell somebody like, hey, like I'm thinking this stupid thought. What do you think about that? And they may be like, yeah, that's like really stupid. And then you may realize, oh yeah, it is really stupid. But then in your mind, you're thinking like, oh, this makes like so much sense. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go here. I got this really strong desire to like preach like in Miami and this and that. And we talk about Miami because everybody knows that Miami is like the land of like, Maya. It's a brahmachari killer. So when we think I'm going to go preach in Miami, I'm going to open up my own preaching center, this and that. And then we may like be thinking all that, and then like, we're fried out about some situation or whatever. I'm just kind of painting a picture. And then we may tell somebody that, and then we'd be like, man, like, you think about going to Miami, but like, you're already having so much trouble here. And like, you just had some problems like a couple weeks ago, like, don't go to Miami. You'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that, So that's how the mind is. That's why Kṛṣṇa says the mind can be the best of friends or the worst of enemies. Because it's just your worst enemy sometimes. Like if you knew something was your worst enemy, you wouldn't associate with them. You'd be like, that's my like nemesis. Stay away. But the mind's not like that. It's like we hear the mind, we think, oh wow, that's like really good. That's like a good idea. And that's what a lot of people think before they go to jail. Like that's a really good idea. Like I'm not going to get caught. And then they get caught, and it's like, oh dang. And then and then it's like, then you go to court and you got to get a lawyer, and then you got to kind of like, they got to figure out a story from you to make you look like, get some less jail time. And they usually just take the plea deal. But then initially you weren't thinking about, like, you thought you were going to get away with it, but then there you are, like, taking the plea deal or whatever. But anyways, so that's the position of the mind. So the point is that we should be open to being a fool in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. It's a good position to be a fool sometimes, actually. And Lord Chaitanya makes that point, especially saying in front of the spiritual master, one should be a fool. Not like an outright idiot, but in the sense that one shouldn't think that he's more intelligent than the spiritual master. So continuing, Shukadeva Goswami said, just to help Indra, Lord Vishnu killed the two brothers, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Because of their being killed, their mother Diti, overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, contemplated as follows. Lord Indra, who is very much fond of sense gratification, has killed the two brothers Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu by means of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, Indra is cruel, hard-hearted, and sinful. When will I, having killed him, rest with a pacified mind? So therefore, she's thinking he's sinful because, he killed her sons. But maybe, what about her sons? I was thinking that point maybe it got forgotten because one chapter described Hiranyaksha terrorizes the universe. He did so many things to thwart Brahminical culture. But it's like but that was all kind of forgotten. When dead, the bodies of all rulers known as kings and great leaders will be transformed into stool or ashes. If one enviously kills others for the protection of such a body, does he actually know the true interests of life? Certainly he does not, for if one is envious of other entities, he surely goes to hell. Diti thought, Indra considers his body eternal, and thus he has become unrestrained. I therefore wish to have a son who can remove Indra's madness. Let me adopt some means to help me in this. So we see she's becoming super self-interested, and she's willing to kill a relative because she's actually related to Indra. Because Indra is a descendant also of Kaśyapa from her co-wife Aditi. Thinking in the end, constantly acting to satisfy Kaśyapa by her pleasing behavior. O King Diti always carried out Kaśyapa's orders very faithfully, as he desired, with service, love, humility, and control, with words spoken very sweetly to satisfy her husband, and with smiles and glances at him, Diti attracted his mind and brought it under her control. So we see here that Diti, she did everything a chaste wife should do, right? She seems like the perfect wife, serving her husband this and that, but what's her purpose? She wants to kill one of his sons. But she did all that because she was self-motivated. She simply wanted to please her husband in order to receive a benediction for her own selfish gains. Although Kaśyapa Muni. So, anyways, one point to make here, and I don't have time, but a lot of these purports are actually very, very good and very instructive. I was actually reading through them the other night. There's a lot of good points actually in this pastime. That are very helpful in one's Kṛṣṇa consciousness and just kind of breaking free from the spell of sex attraction. Although Kaśyapa Muni was a learned scholar, he was captivated by Diti's artificial behavior, which brought him under her control. Therefore, he assured his wife that he would fulfill her desires. Such a promise by a husband is not at all astonishing. In the beginning of creation, Lord Brahma, the father of living entities of the universe, saw that all living entities were unattached. To increase population, he then created woman from the better half of man's body, for women's behavior carries away a man's mind. So that's also an important point to know, that women's behavior is given some special Shakti by Brahma. So they're empowered in one sense. So to be very careful in that. And let's see here. There's so many important points here, but let's see here. Let me see if I have anything in this. I thought I'd save something from this. Let's see. Oh, that's a further one, but anyways, there's a lot could be said. I can't go through it all. So continuing. O my dear one, the most powerful sage Kaśyapa, being extremely pleased by the mild behavior of his wife Diti, smiled and spoke to her as follows. Kaśyapa Muni said, O beautiful woman, O irreproachable lady, since I am very much pleased by your behavior, you may ask for any benediction you want. If a husband is pleased, what desires are difficult for his wife to obtain, either in this world or in the next? When I was reading that, I was specifically thinking of, that was a little bit different, but thinking of Kaikeyi and Maharaj Dasarath. That it was a similar situation, a little bit different though. He'd given her some benedictions, and then she, decided to use them later. But we see it's a similar thing, at least in the sense, because at least with Kaikeyi, her mind changed later, And Vidwan Gauranga Prabhu makes a point in his Ramayan that he put out, that he's speaking specifically with marriage, but it wasn't that nature of Kaikeyi wasn't so apparent actually at the time, that came out later. And she did have some faults, and that's mentioned with her mother. I forget her mother's name, but Maharaj Kaikaya, he got a special benediction from a rishi that he could understand the language of animals. So one night he's laying in bed, and then some ants came by, and they said something funny. Who knows what they said? And he started laughing. And so one part of his benediction was that if he tells anybody what he hears, he'll die. So he started laughing, and then so his wife got like a little self-conscious, like, what are you laughing about? And then he's like, oh, like, you know, I forget exactly what he said. These ants said something I can't tell you because I'll die. But she was like really fried out, and she was like, I don't care, like, if you die, like, you tell me what they said. And so he didn't tell her, obviously, but that point was like, yeah, it's fun. But she was really fried out with him. And those ants must have said something pretty funny. But anyways, that's a whole other discussion, you know, what's going on with these animals, what they're saying, you know, who knows? But anyways, but the reason that sided is because, you know, Kaikeyi like started acting crazy, and she was willing to pretty much kill Maharaj Dasarath in order to ensure that Ramachandra did not take the throne, and he was cast into, you know, exile. Because he's thinking, how will I live without, you know, my beloved? Because he was so attached spiritually, obviously, to Ramachandra. And so, I mean, we saw that, like, shortly after Ramachandra left, I mean, he passed away. He left his body. And it was just like, I mean, what to speak? I mean, it was such a devastating, like, situation when, like, Ramachandra was leaving Ayodhya. Practically the whole, the whole kingdom, they wanted to go with Ram. But then Kaikeyi was like, what the heck is this? Like, they all go, then, like, Bharat has nobody to rule over. Like, this can't be happening. Like, they have to stay. And so, like, it was a horrible situation for everybody for those 14 years. And so anyways, they left, you know, Ramachandra left, and then Maharaj Dasarath left his body. So at that time, it became remembered, like, Kaikeyi's, like, you know, how her mother was and how she's kind of taking after that. So up until that point, like, that was forgotten, but then it came out. And so anyways, Vidwan Gauranga Prabhu was making the point, you don't really, like, sometimes people change, you don't really know their character. And you could probably say a similar thing about Diti, because if Kaśyapa Muni, I mean, we can speculate, but, like, if it was kind of known that she had maybe some, like, this inclination, it may have been a little bit more hesitant to accept her. Because it does seem at some particular point she does have, like, a good side, but then there's also this side where it's just like she doesn't really care, you know, about the, you know, what's right and what's wrong, and she, you know, just did all these things just to trick her husband. But we don't see that character with Diti, or Aditi, sorry. So continuing, let's see here. Okay, so a husband is the supreme demigod for a woman, the supreme personality of Godhead, Lord Vasudev. The husband of the goddess of fortune is situated in everyone's heart and is worshipped through the various names and forms of the demigods by fruitive workers. Similarly, a husband represents the Lord as the object of worship for a woman. My dear wife, whose body is so beautiful, your waist being thin, a conscientious wife should be chaste and should abide by the orders of her husband. She should very devoutly worship her husband as a representative of Vasudev. My gentle wife, because you have worshipped me with great devotion, considering me a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I shall reward you by fulfilling your desires, which are unattainable for an unchaste wife. And then Diti says, Diti replied, O my husband, O great soul, I have now lost my sons. If you want to give me a benediction, I ask you for an immortal son who can kill Indra. I pray for this because Indra, with the help of Vishnu, has killed my two sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Let me see here. Just a couple more verses. Upon hearing Diti's request, Kaśyapa Muni was very much aggrieved. Alas, he lamented, now I face the danger of the impious act of killing Indra. So yet again we see that, like, you know, he became implicated in the whole thing. Alas, I have now become too attached to material enjoyment. Taking advantage of this, my mind has been attracted by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a woman. my wife. Therefore, I am surely a wretched person who will glide down towards hell. This woman, my wife, has adopted a means that follows her nature, and therefore she is not to be blamed. But I am a man, therefore all condemnation upon me. I am not at all conversant with what is good for me, since I could not control my senses. So there he realizes the actual situation, that like he messed up. She was doing all those nice things. He was thinking, oh, she's such a great chaste wife, and then like came out. And sometimes that happens also in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Not exactly that, but like someone's doing service very nicely, all these different things, seems like an amazing devotee, and then one day you open the safe, all the money's gone, and that devotee's gone. And so Prabhupada would say that. There's like a Bengali saying, I forget the Sanskrit, but it's something along like ati bhakti, something bhakti rogi. Yeah, sure, okay, thank you. But explaining that too much bhakti is the signs of a thief. So someone who's overly, enthusiastic, a little too much. It might seem a little weird. Somebody's new, and then they're just, so let me do this, let me do that, and let me do this, and then it's like, okay, like, what are you really, like, why are you really here? Sometimes it may be like that. So that was kind of like the situation there. And so then he realized that. And then I had a couple things from the Purport I wanted to read. Let's see here. But Prabhupada makes a point in the Purport. I'll kind of paraphrase it. But he makes the point about how in householder life, this is the previous Purport, that pretty much that the husband should be trained properly to control his senses as a brahmachari, and then the wife should also be trained properly. And let me see here. So I'll just read it here. In other words, to be a householder is very risky unless one is trained and the wife is a follower of her husband. A husband should be trained at the very beginning of his life. Komara acharet prajño dharman bhagavataniha. During the time of brahmacharya student life, a brahmachari should be taught to be expert in bhagavat dharma, devotional service. Then when he marries, if his wife is faithful to her husband and follows him in such life, the relationship between husband and wife is very desirable. However, a relationship between husband and wife without spiritual consciousness, but strictly for sense gratification, is not at all good. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that especially in this age, Kali Yuga, Dampatye Bhurichur Hetu, the relationship between husband and wife will be based on sexual power. Therefore, householder life in this Kali Yuga is extremely dangerous unless both the husband and wife take to Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Let's see here. So, kind of like summarizing that, there's more that could be read, but I kind of want to stop here. I had another point, but I doubt I'll actually be able to cover it fully. But anyways, but just kind of the point main reason I was reading that, making that point, but just seeing how that point that sometimes in life we may make a choice, and then that choice and decision creates further implications. So yet again, we see that Kaśyapa, he engaged in this act that he knew he shouldn't have. That led to Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha. They did some wild things. They were killed, okay? And then as a result of them being killed, she was angry about that, and then now she wanted to kill Indra. And of course, we'll see here that she got purified, and then the sons were born. Were actually, they weren't enemies of Indra, but they were like friends of Indra. And so Indra goes to actually kill them in the womb, like that. And then they pray to him, and that we're actually your friends, like, what are you doing? So they're actually like great demigods. But anyways, that may not actually be the case with us sometimes. Let's see here. So I had this other point to mention, which was kind of like a longer discussion. Maybe I'll start on it and then just stop partway or kind of try to summarize it quickly. So Srila Prabhupada makes another important point here, which is, I would say, a vast subject. So diṣṭāya, worshipable fate. And the point of being made here is that, so Kaśyapa Muni, he offered his obeisances under worshipable fate. And then he laid with her in a secluded place. And that could be a big subject in and of itself, in the sense that it could be questioned that did Kaśyapa Muni in some sense understand, or what's it called, that it was his destiny to just fall down and just engage in this act, that there was no other way around it or whatsoever. And there could be different ways of understanding that and analyzing that. Was he forced to do this? And then there was no other way out, that he just had to engage in this sinful activity. It's hard to say. There may be different reasons. Of course, there's always because there's a universal creation, there's different living entities that have to be created. So there always has to be, demigod or demons, demigods that have to be created. So they have to come from somewhere, and they have to have that inclination. So was he just like a victim of circumstance or something, or something along those lines, and like that, and just do the wrong thing? It's a big subject, actually, and then it kind of comes to the point of just, is everything predestined? Because that's kind of like a philosophy that everything is predestined and there's no choice and things like that. And it's a big, huge subject, and I'm not going to cover it all. I may miss some points, but things predestined, and there really is no choice in life. It's just things just happen automatically, and victims of fate, whatever. You get your chart read by the astrologer, and then it's locked in, whatever it says. Okay, you're a bad character, that's it, you're bad for life. Your chart says, you're bad, or you're conditioned in a certain way. You can't change your conditioning. I'll always be like this, whatever. I get angry, so therefore, I'm always going to be angry, or things like that, or whatever. I'm destined to live until I'm 80 because the astrologer said, or something like that, or I'll die when I'm 30, et cetera, et cetera. And things like that. One thing that's mentioned, actually, I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but one argument that the Ritviks say is that, well, Srila Prabhupada, he couldn't have chosen the Zonacharyas because of what happened to them. That they engaged in so many, most of them, engaged in so many crazy activities and such, and they fell down. So, therefore, Prabhupada, he obviously knew the future, so that he knew they would do that, so then why would he choose them to do that? Because, why would Srila Prabhupada put such a people in a position? So therefore, he knew that they would, some of them would fall down, and he didn't pick any gurus, because why would he do that to his movement? So they say like that. Or maybe in our own lives or in other lives, we see devotees are tested and they fail, or they don't stand up to the mark, or whatever. We think they may not stand a chance or something like that. And that may be something that's seen commonly, that someone's practicing seriously, and then some situation they get involved with, and they just do something, crazy along those lines. And so it's a big subject. So did they stand a chance, or did Kṛṣṇa put them in a certain situation that they just, they had no chance. They just had to choose Maya. I sent you a link, or Ollie sent you a link via WhatsApp. So this kind of topic was brought up to Srila Prabhupada. We'll read through some of it. It's actually a long conversation, and I'll kind of paraphrase some of it, because a similar thing was brought to Srila Prabhupada. It should be, Ollie Kṛṣṇa. Yeah, that. Yeah, because it's actually a big subject and a big conversation. But Srila Prabhupada was more or less asked the question that, pretty much that Krishna's all-knowing, and so Kṛṣṇa knew that, pretty much that if he gave us senses and he put us into Maya, so therefore he knew that, we would use our material senses for material sense gratification. And he knows I'm weak and I'm attracted to Maya, so therefore Kṛṣṇa knew that I would fall into Maya. And so he knows that, and then pretty much the onus is on Kṛṣṇa. It's Kṛṣṇa's fault that I'm in Maya, not my own. So, so you're gonna scroll down a lot. So go to Kṛṣṇa as the friend of everyone. You maybe search it, because this is a big thing. It's there's a lot of different things are discussed in here. Kṛṣṇa is the friend. Okay. So Rameshwar, Kṛṣṇa is a friend of everyone. Prabhupada, yes. Rameshwar. So why does he allow me to have this independence? Prabhupada, no, not his. Why not? Rameshwar, because it is not good for me. Prabhupada, then you are not perfectly Kṛṣṇa Amsa. Kṛṣṇa has got independence, you see one son is born, even a father has got a black spot here. Sometimes the son has got a black spot. Rameshwar, but it's not good for me. If I will misuse it, why would Kṛṣṇa give it to me anyways? She's making the point. Kṛṣṇa gave me independence. He knows I'm going to misuse it, and I'm just, so like, why did he do that? Why did Kṛṣṇa put me in this situation? Prabhupada, yes, therefore, the demand is you surrender, rascal. You are suffering, you surrender. That is your good. Therefore he comes. He loves his sons. You rascals, why are you creating plans? You come here. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. I shall give you all comforts. Rameshwar, Kṛṣṇa knows everything in the past and everything in the future. Prabhupada, yes. Rameshwar. So when Kṛṣṇa knows that I will misuse my independence, but still he gives me independence. Prabhupada, that is Kṛṣṇa's mercy. So Prabhupada's making the point that as Kṛṣṇa's mercy, he's giving you independence so you have a choice because love is voluntary. But then Rameshwar, because there's a devotee that's actually saying this, that blooped out. And so they're bringing up the arguments to Prabhupada. And they'll mention the devotee later. But Rameshwar's making the point that, well, like, he gave me it, but then he knew I was going to misuse it. So, like, Kṛṣṇa knew it was going to be a Maya. So, like, kind of like, so, like, why would he let me suffer like that? Ramesh, that's Kṛṣṇa. So, anyways, that's Kṛṣṇa's mercy. Rameshwar, even though it is bad for me, push to Kṛṣṇa. You say Kṛṣṇa knows you are going to misuse your independence. Rameshwar, because he knows everything in the past and everything in the future. So he must. Kṛṣṇa is all-knowing. Prabhupada. This present, future means just like a father knows how the child is. Now, if the child changes and touches fire, Kṛṣṇa knows it will burn. He knew when the child did not touch the fire, his future. And when he touched the fire, Kṛṣṇa knew the results. So he always knows. His position is to know the future. He always. Now you are changing what is the future due to your little independence. So that's an important point there that Prabhupada's mentioning, that there's that choice that's there pretty much to like do something stupid or to be in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. So that's the independence that we have. So so it's not that we're forced that, okay, like, whatever, we go out and distribute books and then encounter some heavy situation and we just like completely run off with like some Maya Devi. So we have a choice in that situation, and Prabhupada's making that. And then Kṛṣṇa knows, okay, like if you make that choice, this is going to happen. If you don't make that choice, that's not going to happen. And then Kṛṣṇa also knows what we're going to do exactly. But we have that independence to choose or not. It's not like we're not forced, that's the point. So you can actually say that Kṛṣṇa knows you'll misuse your independence. He knows if you misuse your independence, what will happen. But it can be actually said that, yes. Push to Kṛṣṇa. He knows you will definitely misuse. Prabhupada, yes. Push to Kṛṣṇa. You can use your independence properly. It's up to you. Prabhupada, yes. Brahmeshwar. But that limits Kṛṣṇa. If you say that Kṛṣṇa did not know when I will misuse, or I will, Prabhupada, no. That means you do not know what is the independence. You can change your position at any time. That is your independence. Rameshwar. But doesn't Kṛṣṇa know if I will do it? Prabhupada, yes, because you are independent. That is the meaning. Rameshwar, marginal. Prabhupada, what will be? That will depend on, and he knows the results. Just as lawyer knows that he has done this, criminal, he'll be punished like this. So his position is to know the future is always there, either in this condition or another condition. Rameshwar, but the lawyer doesn't. Prabhupada, why Kṛṣṇa? Everybody knows. Suppose you've got this body. Next body, he's a dog. I can say you'll bark. Rameshwar, yes. Prabhupada, what you'll do, that's all. What to speak of Kṛṣṇa, I could say. Push to Kṛṣṇa. That was Sat Sarup's question, Sat Sarup Maharaj's question. Prabhupada, no, this is the answer. Kṛṣṇa's position is always the same. He knows past, present, and future. And then naming a specific devotee. Rameshwar, this is Karandar's problem, this point of philosophy. He cannot understand it. His argument is that he is having so much trouble due to his sense attraction, and Kṛṣṇa gave him the senses as a sense attraction, or Kṛṣṇa gave him senses. Now he's having trouble controlling his senses. But he argues that Kṛṣṇa knows everything, so Kṛṣṇa knew that he would have trouble controlling his senses. Therefore, why did Kṛṣṇa give him senses? Prabhupada, that is nonsense. Rameshwar, he says Kṛṣṇa is playing games. And Prabhupada makes an interesting point here, and then I may stop and then just kind of wrap it up. Prabhupada, I have given you charge of this BBT. Millions of dollars you are dealing, but it is not for your misuse. As soon as you misuse, that is your responsibility. Rameshwara, yes, but he says still, you know that I'm going to misuse it. Prabhupada, no. That Kṛṣṇa knows when something charge is given. But because you are independent, I know that Rameshwar is a very good boy, let him be in charge. But you can misuse at any moment because you have got independence. You can misuse at any moment. At that time, your position is different. This is Karandar's. He was in the position, but as soon as he misused it, immediately Kṛṣṇa changed his position. Let's see here. So just kind of like to summarize here, because it's a good bit. Anyways, it's an interesting conversation. So kind of the point there that Prabhupada's making is that, and he's hammering it in because it's an interesting point, because Karandar was in the movement for some time. He knows the philosophy and everything. So just kind of like taking that philosophy and then in one sense kind of like using that to try to justify one's position in the material world or in Maya. But Prabhupada's making that point that, at any moment, a devotee can misuse his position in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. And Kṛṣṇa knows whether or not that'll happen. But at the same time, it's not that individual is forced to. So every individual has that free will to either choose Kṛṣṇa or choose Maya. And we see in that particular verse, what is this? Daivyesha gunamayi mama maya dhuraya mam eva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. So Kṛṣṇa makes the point by saying yea onto those who prapadyante, they surrender, that he helps them, cross over. So Kṛṣṇa makes the distinction of those specific entities that they surrender, that he'll deliver them and save them. So that distinction is made. So for our position is that if we surrender to Kṛṣṇa, we'll be saved. But if we don't, then we'll be in the material world. But that's an interesting conversation. I just thought that discuss that because we see a similar situation with Kaśyapa Muni, in which he was placed in a certain situation and kind of went that route. And of course, that was needed to facilitate the procreation process of the universe. But we should never fall into that trap in Kṛṣṇa consciousness and just think that whatever, we're destined to be in Maya or whatever. It's just there's no choice. There's always choice and there's always independence. And Kṛṣṇa is always there to help, but we have to actually endeavor and make that choice and make that decision. And things can change in a second like that. And so Prabhupada was making that point that devotee was good, but then as soon as he changed his position, Kṛṣṇa removed him. So a similar thing could be said with some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples that were in good standing and then became in bad standing. At that time, they were in good standing, and so they remained in their position, but when they changed, Kṛṣṇa removed them from the situation, or they came down from that and engaged in some other service. So anyways, there's a lot that can be said about those different things. But the main thing is to always endeavor to be at the highest degree of Kṛṣṇa consciousness in every moment, and to move in that way. And specifically in this purport, that's exemplified by Haridāsa Ṭhākura, who, of course, it may be different for different individuals, but the point is that at every second, he was chanting and worshiping Kṛṣṇa each day of his life. So I'll stop there if there's any questions or comments about anything.
This last point you were making as far as free will and predestination, I think I've asked you this before. I'm asking you one more time because I'm a fool. But I'll prelude it. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Kṛṣṇa tells Arjuna to just see all these warriors. They're already dead.
Yeah.
He says, I already killed them. You're worrying about trying to save your friends and relatives, but all of them are already finished. Right, and we understand that Kṛṣṇa actually arranged certain things to happen for this battle to occur, so that he can reduce the demonic population, right? So in that sense, you can say that it was Kṛṣṇa